Building raised planting beds and retaining walls are great do-it-yourself projects. Now, people that do these lots of times will use wood products, or things like railroad ties or treated landscape timbers.
And nowadays, wood can be treated to resist decay and last pretty long even when it's buried in the ground. But you really have to install it properly or you will end up with rot problems.
So, for do-it-yourselfers, we think a concrete product is a real good idea. Now, there are a couple of brands of interlocking concrete blocks like this on the market, and they work under the same basic principles.
Probably the most important principle is to prepare the base for the wall properly. Now, on a project like this one, where we're only going a couple of rows high with a wall, it's not that big a deal.
Well, the main thing we have to worry about is not disturbing the soil that we'll be leaving in place. And we do this by what we call skimming. And I'm starting out here by cutting an edge around the outside of our planting bed.
The proper technique for skimming out dirt to create the base for a block retaining wall is to run the shovel almost horizontally. You're scraping up the soil you want to remove, but you're not digging up the soil underneath. Now, you should use a shovel with a square nose. Dean likes the one with a long handle so he can stand up straight and kick it with his foot. For me, it's a little easier to use a shorter spade. Now, as we dig down here, we want to check two things. First, we want to make sure that the block is buried about halfway down. And that would be about 2 inches down. Okay, it looks like we've got it about where we want it here in the front.
Our lawn here has a pretty good uphill slope. We figure about 15 inches from the front of the tree ring to the back. So what this means for us is the first row will only go to a point until it starts to die into the uphill grade.
Just keep working around until we've dug 4 inches. That's the depth of a block. Looks good. Oh, we've got a little high spot over here.
Okay, I'll take some of that out.
As we've been digging around, we've also been checking to make sure our base is level.
Okay, give that a try.
Looks good.
All right.
Okay, we'll put that first block in. Oh boy, what are we going to do about our flange back here?
Oh, I'll tell you, that ground is so hard.
It
How
really
about if I
is.
start busting off some flanges?
Oh, that's a good idea. Now, the blocks have a flange on the back here. This is what keeps each row locked into the row underneath. For the first row, you can knock the flange off if you want, or you can just force it down into the dirt a little, and that'll help hold it in place. The ground is so hard here, that just isn't going to work.
To take off this flange, you hit it with a hammer. You can probably use just about any hammer, but we're using a brick chisel. And be sure to wear safety glasses when you're doing this, because chips of block are flying all over the place. Get this over here. Now, you want to be sure to check the level of the blocks as you put them in position. Let's see, a little low right there.
Okay. Now, if you need to make minor adjustments, you just use a little sand to raise the block. Now, you don't want to use loose dirt, because that will settle a bit over time. Should be
Give that a
okay.
try.
Well, that looks
That looks real good. Grab another one here. Okay, let's check this one out. It's kind of, yeah, it's way low here in the back.
Okay.
Must have dug that out kind of steep. Didn't even know it. Okay. Is that spot right there?
Yep. Now, the first row sets the shape for the whole project, so you want to make sure that you've got it just right. You know, this looks kind of tight in here, but I guess that's the way we need it, isn't it?
I think it looks all right. Let's get this one in here. Now, another thing you want to remember about these is you want to make sure that they're sitting right next to each other. The front edges should be touching, like they are on our block here.
As you finish each row of a wall like this, you need to backfill in behind the blocks. Now, since this wall is so simple, we're going to fill in with a little soil, and then we'll tap it down really well.
And to compact it, I'll just use the end of a 4x4.
It's also real important to have the top of each row clean before you put on the next row. So if there's any dirt, you do need to sweep it off.
To get our blocks ready for the second row, we're knocking off flanges on either side. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we have a curved wall. If we had a straight wall, it wouldn't be necessary. The flange on the back of the block here would line up and lock the block into just the exact position. But we're working with a curved wall. So what we run into there is the entire flange will hold the block back too far. So by knocking off the two sides of the flange, you flip this over, put it in position, and it's in exactly the right spot.
Once we've knocked that little bit of flange off the edge of the top blocks, they fit down squarely over the bottom row.
Now what we've done here is set up what's called a running bond pattern. That's where the joints between the blocks on the second row line right up on the middle of the blocks on the first row. Okay, there you go. Once we get to a straight section of wall, we don't have to knock the flanges off anymore. We can just keep on going. Now our second row will die back into the hillside a little bit further than the first row. So it's time to do a little bit more skimming.
Now what's important here is that we skim out to the exact same height as the top of the bottom row. Here where the first row ends, there was a little gap where we'd skimmed away for the first row. So we just filled it in with a little dirt, tamped it down really well, and then put a little sand over it to level it out. Okay, now we'll just continue along with our second course here until it finally dies into the hillside too.
Well, because we're building a raised planting bed, we needed a little extra fill. So we picked some up in the truck, load it up here in the wheelbarrow, and we'll just haul it over to our site.
Okay, well, that's the procedure. We just keep going along until we finished all the rows the same way. Okay, cleaned off. I guess I can start putting this up here.
Okay, here's another one for you.
Okay.
Boy, you know,
Let's see.
this stuff is so rock hard.
I
I'll
know.
tell you, just about pick to get off.
Well, this is looking up too. Okay.
How we adjusted the back curve here to avoid having any partial blocks on the top row. We just flattened out a little bit to avoid this. Now we can go ahead and fill in the area, plant a tree, and add some flowers.
This is a very straightforward retaining wall project. It took us the better part of a long day, but now we'd like to show you one that's a little more complicated.